My new book, Pillars for Life, A Guide to Spiritual Ethics and Practice, is now out and available for you to read and purchase. You can check out our website, willowhealing.org, to find a link, or you can find it on Amazon. We look forward to getting your feedback, and if you love it, please leave a review and share with your friends. Now it's time for the show. Welcome to Willow Healing Matters, the podcast. We are so excited to have you joining us on this journey where we explore different ways to empower your soul, whether it's healing in your kitchen or all the way up in the corporate world. Come with us as we look into different ways to heal your mind, body, and soul.
Hey everyone, it's Catherine Cristani with another episode of Willow Healing Matters, and today I'm joined by the beautiful Erin Cutrone. So she is a therapist and has been for almost 20 years, and she's the host of the Align with Love podcast, the founder of The Space, a global virtual wellness platform. She's helped people navigate anxiety, depression, trauma, and symptoms through a holistic lens. She highlights some of the missing links of healing, health, and wellness, including the nervous system, the physiology of stress, somatic embodiment, which is through the body, mindfulness, and bottom-up approaches, which are at the forefront of her work, as well as more subtle vibrational and energy medicines to allow greater access and connection to their authentic self, greater connection to each other and to the world. So a big welcome to the show, Erin, and I'm excited to see where this conversation goes.
Me too. Thank you so much. Thank you. I know it's like all things healing. I'm like, let's talk all of the things.
Yes, why not? Exactly. All things that maybe that's what we're going to call the episode, All Things Healing. Done.
I love it.
So what pulled you into healing, Erin, and started you on your journey?
How did it start? I think it was just a natural calling. As a young person, I was always in the industries of, I like to say, bartending and waitressing. And so that was just naturally hearing people's challenges and problems. But, I've had my own overcoming of trauma, and that was definitely a part of my journey in my family and in my own life. And some of the pieces that, surfaced later in life, and I call it like the stored trauma or the stored emotion, really started to change how I saw through the lens of trauma and holistic things that, talk therapy was missing and all of the books were missing. So I think that was a huge piece of my shift.
Yeah, and I feel like everyone has to go through something, no matter how big or small, in order to go, hang on, I need to start questioning. There's more to this than, what is being made. And I'm still stuck in the same cycle doing what I'm told is the traditional approaches. I need to look outside those.
And it's funny, I started as a therapist it was like my calling. My first degrees were this in psychology, and then I started studying yoga. But I got into therapy very young, and I found my way into, I started with psychiatric hospitals. I was working with foster care kids. And then I found my way into other people's private practice. And I remember like doing profound work. And they're like, what are you doing with these people? And so much of it was just intuitive, just by listening. And, I know this is sort of your realm too. I saw you do the muscle testing and just when we tap in as the open channel. And I've also moved more towards mentoring clinicians and wellness providers to help them sort of access that space of, well, what happens if it's not just cut and paste? Here's what they're telling you to do, but if we're doing all of the things and they're not working, what are we missing? And so I moved a lot into the heart, and I called my business as Anahata. And for a while I was like, do I move away from this? Like nobody knows what this word means. And I was like, nope, this is like the crux of what we're doing. Anahata is taken from the yogic philosophies, and it's Sanskrit for the heart chakra or the heart center. And how I see this is in our world and in our work, all of the barriers that we have put up. We get hurt and we just put up these walls and we have these adaptations. So to access like a true healing for me, it's always going to be, well, we have to tap into that heart space and what is barricading it, and for good measure, of course.
Yeah, definitely. And the heart, people don't realize how many heart walls that we put up, right? And especially with every event that we go to that kind of attacks our heart, we end up putting a barrier, which is there for protection. But at the same time, the more barriers and layers that you have around your heart, the harder it is for you to heal and shift out of
Mhm.
those traumatic states as well.
And I think because of, like you said, that my podcast is aligned with love, that alignment is so much a part of my work. And if we're talking nervous system, and literally where the nervous system's like center point is, it passes right through all of that. So if any part of that is out of whack or barricaded or offline, so when I teach about the nervous system, I just speak to, very simply the parasympathetic and the sympathetic. And I call it really our stress and survival and our safety system, right? So if we're trying to get back into our safety system, we have to talk to that alignment piece. If there's a blockade there, it's not, central column is not online, is how I say that, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's been pulled, the energy's been pulled into other directions, right? Rather than channeling through that life force through the middle and allowing it to
Mhm.
flow through.
Mhm. And what I and how I explain it is, the top piece of that nervous system is our brain. So if any part of those systems are out of whack, and I use a lot of visuals when I speak, and I also speak sometimes very vaguely because people will be able to insert what sort of makes sense for them in some of these spaces. But those bottom up approaches, when we're working with the body, if the brain is always picking up those signals and there's something out of whack there, then there's often misinterpretations happening from that brain. So that's how I start to weave that neuroscience piece of that helps. So when I was really young doing this work, that seemed almost intuitive, like as an open, I used to call it like an open vessel, and really listening to people. Sometimes like words would come out of my mouth and I'd be like, I've never said those words. Like, these are not my words. Like, something else is speaking through me. Um, and I remember my director one day saying, like, what is it you do? And I'm like, I have no idea. Like, I have to jot these notes down because if I go back, like, those words are not mine, you know?
Exactly. And it's like when you're holding that space for people and you're just kind of like channeling through what they need, it is exactly like that. I'm the same. I don't remember anything that I tell people after the
Mhm.
fact. And I'm just like, they're like, remember when you said this? I'm like, nope. And they're like, really? And I was like, no, I don't remember because it wasn't for me. It was for you, you know?
Right.
And that's the biggest thing. And I think it's a really nice fail safe for us too, because
Mhm.
otherwise too much gets caught up in our systems
Yeah.
and we can't let it go as well.
And that's why I tell people and my staff and my clients and the mentees that come to me, I'm constantly like wiping like I'll like pass through the brain of just like, like the etch a sketch, but of the brain. And I think that's where we get jammed up, is that brain's interpretation and the brain's need to make sense of. And sometimes it's like do less, think less, and let that stuff come through because it's there. And I think, like you had said so beautifully, is like, we're the conduit. I don't take credit for what people do and they come back and they're like, thank you so much. And I said, I just lay all this stuff out and you take it. I'm just the conduit. It comes through me, but I don't take credit for it when they do well. And I don't take credit for when they get stuck. It's just like, okay, this is what you're doing with this and how beautiful. That's, so much of this work is helping people realize that they are their own healer, and it's so cliche when I say that sometimes, but we're constantly looking outward for that information. And we do it with podcasts and we do it with books and we do it with, all of the YouTube videos and even the therapy. And I'll say, if it doesn't feel right, if it's something that I'm saying, you know best, and start to listen to that voice. And, where it gets a little wishy-washy sometimes is sometimes that's their medical provider. Sometimes that is their therapist. And if they can, I say cultivate that trust within themselves that like, this just doesn't feel right. It's probably right, most of the time. And then this other
Exactly.
voice comes in. It's like, but it's my doctor and this is what they said. And, you know, I put a lot of the asterisks on the side, but really like our body knows. It's so intuitive.
Exactly. And it's about as well not giving your power away in those situations, because so often when it comes to that, but my doctor said, you've actually given your
Mhm.
power away, because you're
Mhm.
not actually going to them for advice or
Mhm.
to get, if people come and work with us, I'm assuming you're the same, Erin. It's like, well, you weigh up what we say and you take what lands and you let go what doesn't, because you got to use your own discernment. But when people go to the doctor, they go with a different mindset where I'm going to go and I need to go get this, whatever he tells me to do, or whatever she tells me to do, I'm going to do,
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
it's actually giving your power and your authority away rather than keeping it with yourself.
And I love that because I've created a program. And so moving from therapist to coach, I do a lot of the same stuff and I mean, I've been in this field 20 years. I've worked across the age spectrum, across the imbalances, and I do a lot of the same stuff. And it really is tapping back into that nervous system and those bottom up approaches. Um, but I call it empowered mental health. And really because it's you in power, and how do we get some of those missing links that we're not being taught into this work. And it is so much more about being intuitive and trusting and listening in to ourselves more than, so it's like, okay, we're giving this permission slip of, you probably do know, right? But let's clear that lens so it's not coming from those old traumas and those old wounds, that it will shape the way we view the world. So that's part of what we do, is like, how can we start to discern what is old and what is new? Specifically because I teach the nervous system, those experiences, whether they were real experiences or sometimes I say misinterpretations, they're stored in our body and specifically in that nervous system. And that nervous system doesn't know time. It doesn't know that we're not 7 or 5 or in utero still. It's the same system. And over time, it's just evolved to what kind of information it's taking in. So I love that. It's just like, yeah, it's probably right. But let's start to discern, when we were infants or young people, it was survival. We did need that thing probably. Otherwise, we would have died. We need that sense of belonging. We need that person to hear us. And so when we start to say, oh, timestamp 2025, I prefer it, or I want it, or I'd like that, but it's not life or death here. So we really start to speak to that nervous system and let that body inform us. And then we can access the mind activity, is sort of how I work.
Yeah, and I think it's a really important point you brought up, to listen to our body and listen to the wisdom that our body actually has, because a lot of people just like to mask those symptoms. They don't like to go underneath and go, oh, why have I still got a sore shoulder despite everyone saying there's nothing wrong with it? Because
Mm-hmm.
it can be an underlying emotional pattern that's holding it in, that pain pattern in itself. And then when you dig it out, you're like, oh, here we go.
And I do that. That's part of that intuitive work that I started doing very young. I would see people coming in with a lot of the same symptoms and I call it the imbalances, but those physical body aches on top of it. And that's where I weave, the energetic anatomy or my yoga background. And I work with those flower essences or vibrational remedies. So I start to see the body as this whole operating system. And let's say it's IBS, which so many people are suffering from. I just go right to, well, what is the function of those organs? And it's, literally, what are we letting go of and holding on to, or what are we getting nourishment from? And so when I say those things to those people who experience that, they're like, ooh, what am I holding on to? A lifetime of experiences or things I was never able to say. And it's interesting, you had, when we were chatting, I had gone back to see, like, okay, well, what did we talk about? Maybe we would talk about, and it was like the triggers and the symptoms not being a bad thing, and that's where so much of this for me is, a lot of the stuff that comes up is just trying to seek resolve, and so it's going to keep experiencing it or seeing it or have its perception point on that thing, so we see it. So those triggers really are an invitation, and those symptoms become an invitation. But in our world over here in the States, medicine is often quieting those symptoms. And how do we quiet that? And Not that I don't think it can be helpful, but first, if you can endure some of that pain a little bit longer, or distress, I call it the distress tolerance, let's start to extract some information before we mute it. It's going to give us really important information. When is it coming up? Around who? In what environment? What time of day is it happening? And so people don't realize that, oh, it's actually maybe trying to communicate something. Maybe it's always around bosses or public speaking or people of authority or men or women, and they're like, wow, we're not taught to think this way. And to me, it's so like, what do you mean? Like, we need to take the information before we shut it down, because those signals will keep signaling. So if we shut down the part that we need, that undercurrent is still there, and that also starts to become that stored emotion. And like you said, the shoulders are extensions of our heart. So yeah, what happened here might be, yes, you had that accident on a skateboard or a fall, but it might also be that end piece of, yeah, what have I been holding that is just getting lodged now, to bring my awareness to it.
Exactly. And I've worked with so many clients personally, like doing intuitive healing. And I'm like, what happened when you were 2? And they're like, oh, we can't remember. I'm like, let's imagine. So this is what people
Mm-hmm.
like, they default to that. I can't remember that, but your subconscious knows, right? So,
Totally.
and then when you start to pull it out, it gets really, really clear. Like I've had very vivid memories from when I was like 2, because when you're open to it and you're allowed it to come through, you can see it so clearly and see it play out. And even you can go back further than that, but you have to just be trusting and allowing. And it might not be exactly what happens, but it's enough that that's how your subconscious, like you said, interpreted the events. And that's how it came in. And it's through being open and allowing and letting that come up that you can do some of the deepest healing that you don't even realize you needed.
Yes, I love that. Yes, because that body, and I love that you said, like, brought back some of that like misinterpretation, because these experiences often happen when we're very young, and we know that the brain is not developed until later on in life, 28, 29. So I say, it could be very real that those things did happen. But for example, the little, like, I'll use my home as an example. Everything was to be like immaculate. Beds were to be made a certain way, rooms were to be kept a certain way. And if they weren't, that could be well, we would get in trouble. And so, that interpretation to the system is, I do this with a lot of the clients that, have to have the things in the sink and it has to be just so. And it's like, okay, well, we have, again, that preference here, but is it life or death here? But when we were young, to an infant system, when your parent is yelling at you, that is scary. So that system kicks on. And so it's helping them dissect a little bit. Like, it does make sense why your body started to develop that. But over time, it gets more and more broad of what resembles that little wound there. And I love that you do that, right, with the NET as well, of what that body is holding on to. We need that energy for creativity and, what we're trying to create in life now.
Oh, NET's fun. My introduction to NET involved me walking into my naturopath, and he's like, all right, we've got your diet sorted and everything, your minerals, whatever you need. He goes, let's just clear any emotions attached to that. And he's like, all right, what happened when you were 5 years old with your dad around this emotion? I'm like, how did you know that? You know what I
Wow.
mean?
Yeah.
Because with anything we go through, it's stored in our meridian systems, it's stored in
Hmm.
those emotional highways. And you can pull out all that information and the depth of how much our body actually stores. I don't think people realize how multi-layered it can be as well. So you might clear off that top layer of whatever that big emotion was, and then all of these other little emotions come through. And that's why I always talk about know your triggers, know your wounds, because they never fully go away, because it's
Right.
so multi-dimensional. And at the same time, the more you know it, the more when they come up, it's not going to trigger you as much, because you're a friend with it now. It's like,
Yes.
oh, there's that trigger again. Okay, thank
Yes.
you. And then you can move on a lot quicker rather than going into, you said, that stress response and going into the fight or flight or freeze.
Yes. And I love even the language that you use, we share of to befriend these things because they're spending a lot. I have brothers and they used to lock me in the closet all the time, and to a young child that's like petrifying. And when they would lock me in, what would I do? I would like slam on the door to like let me out, let me out, let me out. And so I try to explain that those experiences are doing the same thing. So if we keep stuffing them, and metabolically we spend a lot of energy stuffing and hiding and pressing down and suppressing, that if we just let it be here, we've just kind of harnessed all of that energy that I'm not using to stuff down or push away. Like literally, we're pushing it away. We're using metabolic energy to do that. If I can befriend it and get to know it and be curious about it, and this like instantly can eliminate that shame component, right? We don't have to have shame. Like our bodies learned how to do this thing. And so, yes, let's let it be here. And we don't even have to do anything with it sometimes. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, it feels so much better. I'm like, of course, because now it's not spending all of that effort to try to get you to see it. And you made another good point that I wanted to touch on for the listeners, because I think when I call this work rewiring, so we do like nervous system awareness, and I call it retraining, really, nervous system training. We're trying to train the nervous system that it doesn't have to be in survival anymore, that it did, and we want it to know that it was okay, but then to bring it back to this safety system. But if those wires have been crossed, I always say, like, if you've seen any of your wires, it's not just one wire. If they've ever frayed, there's lots of little pieces. And anytime we've had trauma or big experiences, those wires get really, they're crossed, and it's a kind of a mess in there. So when we start to rewire and we connect some of the wiring properly, sometimes I say, so for example, if circuitry of electricity, if we flip a light switch, it's going to go through the circuitry and the light is going to turn on. But if those wires have been severed and we've flipped that switch and we keep flipping that switch, that energy is stored in our bodies somewhere. It just hasn't, been able to come to fruition or play out. So when we're connecting the wires, I say sometimes you might start to experience some of those symptoms louder. Things might you might start to act like a teenager. You might start to have tantrums and like throw little fits. And I said, so if that happens, as forewarning, and that's why I say your symptoms might not be a bad thing, but that might mean we're actually connecting that wire and it now has somewhere to go and it is releasing. So, again, why I, quiet some of the activity of the mind is it's going to come up with whatever story and however many stories it's going to come up with. But if we start to terminology it differently, of, oh, this is my body releasing. Oh, I expect this. This is what Erin was saying, or this is what they said was going to happen. When we connect wires, all of that stored energy has somewhere to go. And I say this a lot for our trauma clients or members or students or, trauma people, because it is very scary when we don't know what is happening and we start to act out some of that stuff that is stored. But when we understand it, and that's why I say the missing links is when we understand some of this stuff, it's a game changer. We don't have to say, oh, it's because of, or oh, it means, or oh, this is bad. It's just like, nope, here's my body releasing what it's been holding, and that's, I think, such a nicer way to approach some of this work.
Yeah, 100%. And being really compassionate with yourself and giving yourself that grace. And it's funny because the reason I sound like this at the moment, see, is because I'm going through like this big purging of like the old and this identity shift. And I had this really powerful session with someone 2 nights ago. And when I was asleep, I could actually feel my body working through all the things that came up, but also shifting all this energy. And I knew in my sleep, I'm like, I'm going to wake up and feel like crap. Because sometimes our body needs to go through a purge as well to let all that extra energy out. And the best way it can do it is to make you feel unwell for whatever reason. And it's not a bad thing. It's just your body's getting rid of that excess energy and purging it the quickest way it knows how. And sometimes it is you feeling unwell and you need to come back from that and whatever it might be.
Well, and I'm sure you see this there as well, but here in the States, and specifically, I'm from New York, that movement tends to be very fast. It tends to be go, 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 and more, more, more. And so think about that. It's like forcing us to pause. And, when we're speaking to that nervous system, and, it will always come back to the nervous system for me, but survival and in rest and digest or our safety system, that's where we replenish and rejuvenate and repair. And so for most of us, we do not have healthy relationship with stillness. So
Mm.
most of our bodies will take us out. So we have to lay down, not go out, not talk, not work, and it's like, oh, right. Because I call it, that recalibration that is happening, or the cell on a cellular level. So I love that you're even tuned in with, yeah, all of this stuff is shifting and it recalibrates on a cellular level.
Yeah,
So beautiful.
100%. And it's funny because I'll always go through the same sort of process. So I'll get like a sore throat, and then that won't stay around very long. And then it will go to my lungs, and it will go to the right, then it will go to the left. I know it goes to the left, then it goes to the right, and then it shifts out. Like
Mm.
it's always the same way. And it's to this point that I'm like, all right, I understand what's happening. I know what's happening. I actually need to rest. So, like yesterday, I fell asleep and had a massive nap on the couch, and I woke up and I'm like, oh, that was amazing. My body
Oh,
needed
I
that.
love that.
Thank you very much. But I don't try and suppress it, or, I just let it play out how it needs to play out, because it needs to shift things and it needs to shift the energy so that we can go into the new. And the more you resist it, like you said, the more you fight it, the longer you are in that state, because your body wants you to rest, your body wants you to recover. It doesn't want you to stay unwell, but the more you fight it and the more you keep trying to push through it, the longer you're going to drag it out.
Yes. And Mike, like I just saw as you were talking and explaining, how that moves through your body. I was just having this conversation the other day with one of my very religious people, and they were explaining, they're starting to pick up on like the metaphor and the movement, and intuitively we were speaking about community and in service and helping your neighbors. And she had said that exact movement of like coming down the middle, and that like way we have this cross, but that it's like this higher energy or whatever we want to call above, coming down through the heart and then including our neighbors. And I had never heard that described in that way. So I find that so interesting that that's how your body heals, is like takes what is above us and brings it down through the heart and then connects it through the
Mm.
shoulders, which is the extension, but also that movement of neighbor. Or so very, very cool. I love that.
Yeah, so I remember listening to someone explaining the sign of the cross as a connection between heaven, Mother Earth, and then across the physical plane. And I was like,
Mm,
oh, that makes so much sense. So it's like all these interpretations, like you said, and they always fall into your lap at exactly the right time, this new information, because
yeah.
that is about divine timing. And it's like, oh, I didn't know that, but now I know that. I'm going to incorporate that and see where it goes. And then it's always, and then you'll get a run of those clients, right? So then you'll
Yes.
get a run of people where that's happening to them. And you're like, huh, I just learned this practice last week, or I just went on the weekend. I went and did this course, and it's perfect
Yes.
timing because you need it, and it always happens that way because it's all about divine timing. And those people were meant to book in with you and they were meant to see you.
Yes, and that's that energetic match. And even as you describe that, I always explain anahata as its symbol. And so, I've studied yoga for a long time, and my interpretation, even though I've seen the visual of it many, many times, is very different. So, it's two triangles, one that is longer at the top pointing downward, and one that is longer at the bottom pointing upward, and they overlap. And I've seen really the true image of this many, many times, but I've always like extended it outward. And that was exactly my visual, like that which is below us coming up and that which is above us coming down, meeting at the heart. But then I turn it the other way as well. So that which is behind us and that which is in front of us also meeting at the heart. So that heart center that we have all of these barriers around really is the access point to a lot of this. And we think if we asked any of the listeners, like, where did things start to go awry? It was some pain point, and I put up this wall, or I shut this down, or I pushed them out, and so if we can start to lean into that from this place, from 2025 as an adult or a wiser self, that all of those things we had to do in those moments, that was survival. But
Mm.
we don't have to move in survival here. It's really that discernment of, okay, it felt like danger. And here, like, I'll say, do you have a roof over your head? Can you afford food? Is there food in your fridge? And I say, worst case, we can steal food, like, not condoning it, but like, we have resources here. Like, we will not die here most of the time. So if we can start to train that nervous system and convince that nervous system to move into more safety, we actually will take in different information from that nervous system. So that's like one of my favorite touch points that people don't realize. If we're moving in survival, which in the world today, it's so easy to do that for so many reasons, and we're primed for it. But here it's like, oh, okay, if I'm in my threat system, I'm only taking in threat cues. If I'm in my safety system, I can actually take in different information. And that was like one of the most profound things that I remember learning about that nervous system is, even from a neutral expression or a neutral, experience, we just change that nervous system. So these are the still face experiments I talk about all the time, where we will use breath and we'll activate. And this is really through polyvagal theory, and Stephen Porges does a lot of this work. But when you activate the stress system, the threat system, they might look at your very neutral face and like, what did I do? She's mad at me. I must have said something, and go through the Rolodex of, the whole day or week or month. But then we take that very same nervous system, and with breath, we slow it down and we get them back into the parasympathetic or the safety system. Your face has not changed, the same expression. And they're like, she's so interesting. I wonder what she eats. Is she a vegan? What does she do for fun? And it's like, you haven't changed anything, but literally how our brain functions, how our body functions, and what it thinks changes. So I love to speak to that as, part of this work that is profound. You have to know what nervous system you're in.
Yeah, and it's definitely that shift in perception, right? So, even when you go from that scarcity mindset to the abundance mindset, you look at things so differently. Nothing's changed. Your bank account still looks the same, but all of a sudden you're like, I'm grateful I have money to pay for food. Like you said, I'm grateful I have money for that bill. I'm grateful I have money for, maybe I can get something takeaway today. So it's like when you shift that mindset, then it allows that everything else to shift. And it's not just like you said, the mindset, it is resetting the nervous system that has caused the brain to go into that panic state, because our brain and
Sure.
our logic just wants to keep us safe in the end.
Yes. And it's so interesting you say that because, in my field and through all of the years, there's so many contexts that, I've worked in. But when we speak to money mindset and people, wanting to attract more abundance, I still use the nervous system there and its capacity, and we speak a lot to capacity, but it has to also have capacity to hold more. And that also includes money. So if your nervous system is really taxed, and you can be doing all of the mindset stuff, but we need to tap into that nervous system's ability to hold more. And that becomes so profound as well. And it could be, more experiences, more happiness, more joy, but more money. And people don't realize how interconnected that is as well. It's like, yeah, we can't inundate the system if it's like right there. Let's work with that system to be able to receive more.
It is so funny because when you were saying that, I had that song, More Money, More Problems, pop in my head. Which I don't feel that way at all, but it's funny because that's subconsciously what came straight to my mind when you said that. So it's really interesting how we've been programmed on so many levels on how to,
Totally.
yeah. And, the biggest thing, the stage I'm at is like my coach reminds me, he's like, you need to allow and receive now. You've done all the work. Now you need to allow and receive. And like you said, sometimes our nervous system's so compromised that we forget that part, that we
Yeah.
forget, I've done all this work. I've put all these seeds down. I've done everything. Now I need to allow and receive and give
Yes.
gratitude in that.
Yes. And that's a practice for a lot of
Mm,
people, because our systems, it becomes a muscle and muscle memory that default, as soon as we stop paying attention, it's going to go right back to that movement. And so it's constant awareness and constant training of what am I thinking, right? Like more money, more power. Wait, I don't actually believe that to be true. And I have to retrain that neural pathway. And it's funny because I'll instruct that as, picking 5 different things. So it might be like, okay, so my first line is, we'll use that more money, more problems. And then now if I can start to do like 3 or 4 other possibilities, right? Or money, money, money. And now I'm like, okay, so now it might go default, but if I have 4 other things, that's really training the neural pathways of possibility. And then we start to pick one and strengthen that. So every time this thought or this belief or this limiting belief or this old memory starts to surface, I want to say, oh, right, like I no longer need that, or I no longer believe that. And so now can I strengthen something else? And so that's where, this is where I think affirmation or repetition can be really helpful.
yeah.
1, 2, 10, 20, 50 times a day. Now we have something to resource because our brain doesn't go to the thing it doesn't know. It's all of our
Yeah.
brains,
Just so beautiful. And as we start to finish our time together, Erin, I feel like we could just keep talking.
all things.
All things, all things. I asked the guests that come on the show if you could heal or change something in the world, what would it be?
Ooh, I think this is so much of the work that I do and why I do it, because we speak so much to like the global healing and the unity piece and that compassion. If we understand the how to get there, of learning my own system and not interpreting that person's movement as need for defense, right? That discernment, this is how we start to create those things, and whether it's learning, whether it's compassion, like the brain circuitry literally changes when we access the nervous system. So I think this is really why I do this work, is because I do firmly believe that's the align with love, is how do we create a humanity that is a little more united? And we do that through the heart, and we can do that through the nervous system. So I think that's like the crux of why I do what I do
I love
completely.
it. You're living with the change that you want to see in the world, which is amazing.
Yes.
Beautiful. And
Yes.
if people want to come work with you or connect with you, Erin, how can they find you?
Oh, I guess the easiest way is through the Instagram has all of my links. I have a link tree there. So my New York clients can work with me. I do take insurance. My coaching clients can work with me abroad and all over. I have some, mini workshops that I do. So all of the links, that's probably the easiest, is at anahata_wellness.
Beautiful. And I'll make sure to put all the links in the show notes as well so people can find you that way if they don't have Instagram. But I will
Yeah.
connect with you on Instagram if we're not already. So
Yes. Yes.
a big thank you for coming on, Erin. And I really appreciate that you're living your truth. I love it. Thank you so
Oh,
much.
Catherine, thank you so much. This has been wonderful. Super, super nice to connect.
Thank you for listening to Willow Healing Matters, the podcast. We have so much love and gratitude that you have taken the time out of your day to empower you on your healing journey. The views shared by the person being interviewed might not necessarily reflect that of the host and should be used at your own discernment. Trust what resonates for you and follow your heart and soul guidance. If you have any underlying medical conditions or mental health issues, please consult with your healthcare provider before pursuing any of the recommendations. Likewise, you can always contact the person being interviewed to find out more information. This can be found in the show notes. Remember to activate, align, heal, empower, and find love in everything that you do.